I'm in an ergonomic chair right now. I think that would that'd cause me to bend over. No, God no. Oh no, I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't use it very much. I leave it
Yeah,
on the other desk
yeah,
upstairs. But it has its advantages. But Simran, let's go back a little bit
yeah. Of course.
to format.
Yeah.
GG. So you mentioned that those events they need to be an experience, and I couldn't agree
Yes.
more with you. Especially nowadays, like look at what happened to E3. E3 died,
Yeah.
right? It died
Yeah.
for a reason because it wasn't offering anything of value. People were getting the information from those live streams that all the other companies start doing. Nintendo start doing their own Nintendo Direct. Sony's are doing whatever their events, online events called, and there was just no like incentive anymore to keep going to those fairs, game fairs. Not only that, I think the game industries themselves is stopping going themselves to those
Yeah.
events because they could just promote their stuff online. And so E3 died. I know Gamescom is still a thing here in Germany, and it's still going strong. And
Yes.
why why would you say is that?
So you've hit the nail on the head there, is that offering value fundamentally is to the people that purchase tickets. So it's a growing epidemic in the industry where events are becoming extremely capitalistic. Now, from the event side, I understand why event managers and event organizers fall into this trap, is because these things are very expensive to put on. I am very open and honest about this. These huge events cost considerable large amounts of money, and they primarily rely on free revenue streams, which is sponsorships, ticket sales, and exhibitor fees. Now, when you're hosting these huge events like your E3s, your Gamescoms, the venue alone, like Gamescom, is massive. Have you been to Gamescom?
Yeah, a couple of
Yeah.
times, but not recently because again, I can just watch the clips online. I cannot play the demos on my PlayStation. Just download the demo and that's it. So
Ah,
I don't see a
in
lot of like the reason why I went the last few times were just to see my buddies,
yeah,
to hang
okay.
out. Yeah,
So that's the one reason I go to events is networking. I fundamentally want to go for the human interaction,
yeah.
that element of it. But these events cost tens of thousands, if not million. E3 cost millions, and I know for a fact. So, for example, do you remember the famous Keanu Reeves Cyberpunk E3 presentation? You're breathtaking.
You're breathtaking. No, you
Yeah.
are breathtaking.
Yeah. So, for example, I know the audio company that, and I think I'm allowed to talk about this because they went into liquidation. So technically, there's no one around to sue me. So what I can say is that they did the production for that set for when Keanu Reeves went on stage. And do you know how much the production was? Just the production of Keanu walking onto the stage, the lights, the trailer. Do you know how much that cost to do?
I mean, including Keanu's salary or
Not Keanu's salary, just the production alone.
no, no idea.
$80,000.
Oof.
That was just to do the production. That's not even that's not even Keanu's like salary to be there. That's not the staff. That is just the tech and
But
the production.
but they did announce several things. Like Cyberpunk was one of them, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And they'll have got bang for the buck. That's why they'll have done it that way. Because these things are expensive. Now, in my mind, that's so much money to spend on just one presentation. And ultimately, these capitalistic events is they fall into the trap of getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which means that their costs have to go up, which means ultimately trickle down economics is who ends up paying for those costs? You. Or the sponsors have to, the sponsorships have to go higher, or the exhibitor fees have to go higher. But then games companies are like, well, these exhibitor fees are really high. Like, why are we paying $40,000 for a stand when we can just do a digital showcase and showcase our games off for free? And because ultimately, what events are is PR for game studios. They're going to get influencers, press, or generally glorified QA to get people to play their games and take that back to the development team, or get mailing lists, or get people to sign on, or just get ultimate brand awareness fundamentally for their games. When you think about it, spending $40,000 on a stand, that's an expensive PR move when you could be spending that on an influencer campaign or a digital showcase, which you could ultimately get the same result from, if not greater results, because you can connect that to a global audience instead of just a regional audience that's attending one event. So these events have ultimately become capitalistic, and sadly, as a result of that, is they become very boring, which is where I now come in, which is the thing I'm quite critical of, is that when you start to go to enough of these events, they all follow the same formulas, that they're in these huge industrial warehouses. Now, I host mine in warehouses, but I host mine in event spaces. There's a very corporate, they look like glorified air hangars for planes. That's kind of what they look like most of the time. These big metal monstrosities that look like they should be housing planes and tanks. And it's lifeless. They have no soul. Like, they just you feel like you're just going to stands, you're waiting in line for hours. You might get to the front of the queue and you'll play what, 10, 15 minutes of a demo if you're lucky. And then the consumers basically don't get to actually get the full experience of the event because they spend most of it in queues. And then from a games industry standpoint, they're spending a lot of money to go there because it's not just the stands. They've got the staff, they've got to pay. The staff are taking time out of the studio to go to these events. There's hotels, food, costs, like all that stuff adds up after a while, and it can get really, really expensive, which is why ultimately events now have been getting harder and harder and harder to put on, which is something I think as an event manager we have to take that very seriously. You have to walk this fine line between growing, but then are you growing for the sake of growing, or are you growing because you can actually sustain that? So I have to constantly walk that fine line of, I could go massive if I wanted. Like, I could rent out huge spaces, but it's like, well, then I've got to pay for that space, and I'm going to have to charge the consumers more ticket money. I'm going to have to charge that. And ultimately that, it makes it unfair, and then it becomes too capitalistic. And for me, I've just realized I go to so many events. I go to so many different gaming industry events, whether it's networking events, consumer events. They've all become a little bit stale, which is where I came up with the concept of, why video game events not fun anymore? So even with our B2B events, so we run a lot of games industry networking events, we'll have saxophone players on stage performing live and DJs going whilst people are doing business deals and having publisher meetings in the next room, because it's fun and it creates an atmosphere. And that is ultimately what a lot of events have lost along the way, is fun. And it's just as simple as that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and spew some book that I could write about this stuff. Like, it just comes down to the fact that a lot of events are not fun anymore. And that's why format has continued to grow and grow and grow, and why we're able to do cool stuff like sign deals for animated movies, or get toys made, or energy drinks made, or get the license to TEDx, is because we've demonstrated that we know how to host engaging events that have high retention rate, which is sadly with a lot of events, barring Gamescom, is that you're starting to see this slow retention dip, is because they're not innovating enough. I constantly challenge myself every single year of, how can I make it bigger but do things that no one's doing every single year? And it takes a certain person with a different mindset to do that. A lot of games industry people, especially in the tech and games industry sector, they only specialize in that sector. They only hang around other games industry people or other tech people. I hang out with people like Sensei Sand, fashion designers, rappers, music artists. I'll go hang out with businessmen. I influence a lot of things. Like, even our clothing is a reflection of like early 90s Nike culture a lot of time, because I